What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another Bring the Juice Colts podcast live stream. Thank you guys so much for tuning in on this wonderful Friday evening, capping into the weekend, guys. We have week 13 football coming up this next week. And here to join me today is my guy, my friend of the show, and fellow Colts content creator himself, Drake. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing wonderful. I'm happy that it's Friday, and like we were talking about before the show, it's pretty sweet that there's something to talk about that's pretty daggone exciting for this team. They're on a 3-game win streak, looking to make it 4. Which, look, man, if they win this game against the Titans, you really have to, if not already, it hasn't been generating. You have to start talking about Shane Steichen being a potential coach of the year candidate. I mean, given all the situations that have gone down, all the ridiculous injuries that have panned out at very key positions, this dude just keeps winning. I don't care about the schedule. They're all pros. So any given Sunday can happen. So I'm excited, man, and I'm really happy that the weekend's here and that it's going to be another divisional matchup. Really looking forward to seeing this game and seeing if the Colts can beat the Titans at Nissan Stadium on Sunday.
Absolutely, man. We'll hop into that matchup. We'll talk about some other things as well tonight. Thank you guys so much for tuning in that are here. Be sure, guys, to hit that like button. It helps to get out to more people. Would greatly appreciate as many of you in as we can tonight. Be sure to comment in the comment section. If you have something interesting to say, maybe we'll bring it up on the show as well. Be sure to subscribe, guys, if you haven't already. The podcast just hit over 17.5 thousand subscribers. So greatly appreciate everybody tuning in and doing that for us. And also for people who are tuning in and people who are watching this show live, be sure to go and subscribe, guys, to the page that is in the pinned comment in the comment section, the AFC South Roundtable that me, UCF Jaguar, 713 Houston Sports, and the Titan Upload Network are all a part of. I hope you guys will be able to go to that YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe and tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be going live discussing the AFC South throughout the week. So really hope that you guys will be able to join us and subscribe for that as well. Thank you guys so much once again for tuning in. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. We'll talk for as long as Drake doesn't get bored with me. So we'll go with that as we can. Shout out to everybody in here. Roxanne, what's up? Austin Lancaster, what's up, man? Raymond is saying, will Gardner try to leave for a starting job somewhere, or can he resign for depth next year? Great question. That's definitely going to be something that we're going to have a video on at the end of the year about, because there's a couple different things you could do with that. I mean, Drake, just before we get off on the tangent and everything, me personally, I don't think Gardner's going to, as much as I love Gardner Minshew and what he's doing right now for Indy, it's my humble football opinion. I don't think he's playing well enough to bona fide someone say, hey, come make me a starter, right? Like, we're seeing what he's doing with Indianapolis, and it's not a lot, right? It's enough to barely squeak out some games. I'm just looking at that situation, and I'm like, that doesn't warrant me anyone saying, hey, we're going to give you $10-15 million to come play here and be a starter. It just doesn't seem that way to me.
Yeah, and when he was coming into this season, he was, I think, 2 seasons removed from already being in Steichen's offense in Philly. And I don't know if he really – I know he didn't have like a stellar record as a starter in relief for Jalen Hurts. And that was with an elite level offense. Okay, the fact that, look, this is nothing against Gardner Minshew, but I mean, his numbers really prove it. I mean, 8 touchdown passes, 7 interceptions. All right, now I know that he's not good against pressure and he's kind of struggled with that, but he's only taken 17 sacks. He hasn't been sacked a lot. But yes, you're right, Derek. At the end of the day, it's different planning for Gardner Minshew when he's plopped in the middle of a game in relief. He's very efficient. He's very safe. He doesn't take a lot of risks. And if you didn't game plan for that, a la the last time that the Titans played the Colts and he went in there and carved them up with a good ground game, when you've had a whole week to plan for this guy, it's a lot different. The fact that they won against the Ravens is because of defense and because of Matt Gay's field goal kicking ability. All right,
And
Gardner
Zach Moss for that
Zach Moss
way too. Yeah.
carries. He basically ran the table for the offense. So I'm right there with you. I think that to answer that question, I think that it gives him pretty much I think he might make a little bit more than I think it's like what $3.5 million right now. I think he might make a little bit more for backup money, but he's just not going to be a guy that a team's going to say, hey, come start for us unless they are legitimately thinking future and trying to grab a quarterback in the next draft. And they're just trying to get a guy to bridge him. Outside of that, I don't see it.
And I have no issue with the Colts saying, "Hey, we'll give you $5-6 million
Yeah,
next year.
keep
Come
him
be our
for
backup."
Richardson's
Yeah.
development.
All
Yeah.
for it, because again,
Yeah.
you're winning games with him on the field right now.
Mhm.
There's not many situations where a backup quarterback you keep winning games. But I think the ultimate point to that, before we get into everything else that we're going to talk about today, the only way you pay a quarterback starting money to be a starting quarterback in the league is saying, can we win games off of your back? Right? Drake, honestly, has there been a game this year where Gardner Minshew has played and you said, "Oh yeah, we won the game because of that guy"? Is there a game this season where you've said Gardner Minshew is the reason we won the football game? I think I can tell you there's a lot more instances that we almost lost because of Gardner Minshew a lot more frequently. So that's the issue you have is, again, if it's different from a bunch of other quarterbacks where you say you can win football games off the back of your quarterback. That's why you get the starting money, not from somebody like this. So that's how I'll leave it at that. Smokey Dabs, what's up, man? How you doing? Thank you guys once again for tuning in. Again, guys, 30 of you in here right now. Be sure to like the stream, guys. Helps to get out to more people as we keep it going. Drake, you mentioned it right off the top. We're talking about the schedule and everything else that Indy has had to deal with. We talk about, since them going on that win streak, we talk about they played the Carolina Panthers, right? They played the New England Patriots in Germany. They had their bye week. They won against the Buccaneers. They've won those three. But when you look at in totality, these three teams that they faced have all won a combined 8 games between the three of them. Not great teams that they're beating. But what do you say to those people that are like, yeah, Indy's been putting up these historical numbers that have changed from the beginning of the season to now, but what do you say to them for people who question whether or not the Colts can keep this going?
I mean, I say to them, look, yes, on paper, obviously these teams, by the way, 7 total wins. The Bucks have 4. I think the Pats have 2, and the Carolina has 1. So obviously these aren't teams blowing things out of the water. But Tampa has a top-notch run defense. All right, they have an absolute top-notch run defense that the Colts absolutely punched in the mouth. All right, then you've got the New England Patriots, who I still will say this: it's really hard to find a better defensive genius than Bill Belichick. All right. He gave the Colts everything he could. Mac Jones lost that game for the Patriots. Okay. Yeah. He really did. He threw the ball right to Julian Blackmon in a way that Bill Belichick on the final drive wanted a backup out of nowhere to be in there. He believed in Mac Jones so little that he replaced him for the last drive of the game. So not saying that the Colts didn't earn it, but man, Mac Jones was terrible in that game. And Carolina's defense has actually been the one thing that's kept any game they've had close at all.
Yeah.
So Minshew, though, at the end of the day, I just think that it's easier to game plan for him than it is for Anthony Richardson. Now, having said that, I think it's G.I. Joe 317. He mentions this. Look, there's no one on the entire roster that understands Steichen's scheme better. There's no one on the entire roster that's going to be able to help the other players with it more than Minshew. And he just so happens to be at the most important position. Now, while he's not a guy that's going to go out there and put up, Patty Mahomes or Josh Allen numbers or Justin Herbert type numbers, he's going to go out there and at least what his floor is. And if you can get him protection, he can absolutely dice up a secondary if they're not ready for quick passes. He's good in the RPO system. But at the end of the day, he's got a ceiling. And if you can game plan for him, which it's simple, three things defeat Gardner Minshew. You need to get pressure on him because he does not respond well to pressure at all. In fact, he's the most blitzed quarterback in the entire NFL.
Mhm.
Okay, legitimately the most blitzed
Yes.
guy out of everyone. And it's not even, I can't remember what the metric was last time, but I'm pretty sure it's not even close. Number
I was going to say
two,
he's getting pressured like 40% of the time.
constant pressure every single game, and he doesn't respond well to it if it's not picked up. Number two is force him to try to throw the ball downfield. Okay, he's not a downfield throwing quarterback. And number three is just try to get him out in the open. I mean, yes, he can move, but he's not going to threaten anybody with foot speed. So there's ways to defeat Gardner Minshew, but Shane Steichen's got a lot of things up his sleeve. He's got good running attacks. He's got a good use of getting guys open and getting guys one-on-one situations where they can win. And of course, Gardner Minshew knows his offense. So I think that that's all considered why Minshew is valuable. And honestly, I would keep him around for Richardson's development because he can help
Yeah.
Richardson with that offense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, just the mind of Gardner Minshew. I mean, it's one thing to have him on the field, but I think it's again one of those guys that, yeah, his production it's never been amazingly good, but
Yeah, no.
at the end
Yeah.
of the day, the guys love playing for him, and he's a hype man. He's never gonna let you down with that. So and he plays his hardest, man. I mean, there's guys that I mean, they're in the NFL. I mean, most guys do play their hearts out, but I mean, Gardner certainly does. And I mean, I would say to the effect of it is, I mean, you got to remember, this is the same Colts team that in week 3 beat the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore with Gardner Minshew, who, by the way, took, I think it was 4 sacks in that game. 3 of those were all on Gardner Minshew. So, I mean, you have to think about that. And then on top of it all, they had their best offensive performance against the number 1 defense in the entire NFL, which is the Cleveland Browns. So, I mean, it's yes, this Colts team is facing inferior competition right now, but this team has put up points and put up numbers against some really good teams. And so what if they're playing bad teams? They're winning against the bad teams, which is what you're supposed to be doing if you're a good team, right? If you're a good team, you don't lose to bad teams. That's the whole point. So that's the point. You're winning against these bad teams, and that shows you how Indy would handle this situation. I mean, I'll tell you what, Drake, I'd say out of these 3 games here, under previous coaching administration, I doubt we win more than one of these games if it was coached differently than what we have right now, given what Steichen's done versus what the previous coach has been able to do.
Yeah, and I think that if anyone's curious about just how absolutely ridiculously brilliant Steichen can be at times, like I think the height of his brilliance, watch the last game against the Buccaneers where they bring in Zaire Franklin. They just plop him in at fullback for no reason other than just to be a decoy. Watch that tape. He stands up, looks around, doesn't even his
He doesn't
jersey
even touch
fibers.
anyone.
His
He doesn't
jersey
touch
fibers
anyone.
don't even touch a single person. And what does Minshew do? He pulls the ball in with play action. The whole defense is confused. And here's Mo Alley Cox down the seam wide open. And Steichen's figuring out ways to use Mo Alley Cox when he's probably the tight end 3. And if Jelani Woods is in the game, well, you might even look at him behind Drew Ogletree. So Shane Steichen has really brought out the best that this offense can possibly be. I do think that if you have more conservative play calling and if you have a little bit less variety, like we've seen for the Colts in the past, you're not going to beat the Patriots. You're just not. Okay. And you're probably not going to beat the Carolina Panthers because Kenny Moore accounted for 14 of those points. The
Right.
Colts won by 14 points.
Yeah.
So Kenny Moore actually, if he, let's say he picks those 2 passes off, falls right on the ground. Okay, immediately. Who knows how that game plays out? We could be talking about Carolina getting their 2nd win of the season. So Minshew is what he is. Okay, I do believe that he can be, and most of the time is a higher level backup. People forget this dude's a backup. Okay, I'm telling you though, if we're talking about like a first to 32nd backups right now on rosters, he's arguably number 1. So you probably have the best insurance policy money can buy in the NFL right now at quarterback for the Colts.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, and it stinks too because everyone keeps saying it. You expect Minshew to win games, and It's really not his job. And, it's unfortunate, Drake, because we're in a situation where, Gardner is a backup. You only really ever have a backup for a QB when you plan on maybe your quarterback misses a game or two because he busted up his ankle or his shoulder's really sore after taking a bad hit. And then, maybe he misses a game or two, here and there, right? Like that's what a backup quarterback's role is. Not to, after week 5, have to take over for the remainder of the season and have to put it on his shoulders. So Gardner's been given a somewhat unfair expectation of it all. He's a backup quarterback for a reason now, but at the end of the day, that's what we just have to expect. But looking at the last bit of the season, though, Drake, the Colts are going to face the Titans here this weekend, and we'll talk about that game here in a little bit. You're facing the Bengals, who are now without Joe Burrow, and I think everyone has basically said that the Bengals season is over at this point because they're not the same offense without him. And then you face the Steelers, who, again, that defense, albeit is great, but their offense ain't been great all season. You got to face Falcons right before Christmas. Not a great team. The Raiders, not a great team. And the Houston Texans are really the only team that you have to face that are like, man, that could be the ultimate game changer. So, I mean, going off these last 6 games, what do you think of record-wise what Indy should finish at?
I think a 4-2 record is realistic. I really do. I don't think they're going to beat Pittsburgh because, I mean, literally the last 8 contests since, 2011, they have lost every single one of those against Pittsburgh. I mean, Mike Tomlin, doesn't matter who's under center, doesn't matter who's playing at the skill positions. He just beats Indianapolis. And until proven otherwise, until they actually do it, I just don't think it's going to happen. I do think Steichen has a great chance, though. Reich just couldn't make it happen. And I think that they're going to lose to Houston. And the only reason that I think they're going to lose to Houston is just because I feel like that first game, you plop in Gardner Minshew. Okay, Houston was just reeling off of Richardson absolutely baffling their defense by getting 2 rushing scores. So they were just like, we're going to have to deal with this guy for the rest of the game. He's out. All of a sudden, here's this safe passer. So again, plopping Minshew in, it's the best he can be is when he's plopped in without a game plan. I think that they're going to game plan better for him. I think DeMeco Ryans is in his own way kind of a defensive genius, and I think that it's going to be a close one for Houston. But I do think that last game is going to be very interesting because, in my humble opinion, that's going to be a win and you get in, lose and you're out. I think that game's going to come down to playoff positioning.
I mean, it's funny because ever since the month of November started, Indianapolis hasn't lost a football game yet. We'll see how that goes with December and everything else. The hardest teams on your schedule remaining are the Steelers and the Texans. Really, the only 2 teams that are favored to get a playoff spot at this point. So, I mean, you got to bring your A game here, man. Every victory counts here. And that's the thing to me, like, I know it's so cliche because we're only 11 games into his first season as a coach. Mm-hmm. And it's so, I at the same time don't want to feel like as if we're praising this guy way too much before we see what goes on later. But it's hard to not be excited about how a team that's without a real starting quarterback was missing its running back for half of this season and a star running back at that. No real elite top 10 wide receiver threat here. And then a defense that statistically is one of the worst in the league. Statistically. I say statistically just because statistics don't define everything. We've seen what the defense has been able to do now. But just to take that team that was just fragmented to start this season and at the beginning part of it, and yet still we're looking at the Indianapolis Colts, who now have a 50-50 chance of making the playoffs when a lot of people didn't even think the Colts would win 6 games this year, Drake. And if you had told me that we would have Gardner Minshew starting at week 5 for the remainder of the season, and then Jonathan Taylor didn't play until that point, and the defense would be a bottom half statistical defense, and you told me that team still had a shot to make the playoffs and their destiny is in their own hands, I just said you were crazy. So, I mean, it just goes back to it and say, like, this is all because of Shane Steichen. Like, this is a team that should not be in the spot that it's in, but it is because the coach that's leading these men into battle has them prepared and has them being held accountable.
Yeah, and something that is not talked about enough is everyone talks about Steichen's offensive prowess and his game time management, and just his aggressiveness and his efficiency. All those things are true and they're fair, but his coaching hires. Think about this. You bring in I'm forgetting his name, the running backs coach. It's legitimately slipping my mind.
Yeah, I'm missing
Um,
it too.
so he brought in a new running backs coach. Okay, he's done a fantastic job with Zach
DeAndre
Moss.
Smith.
There you go. Yeah, and I think he was with the Giants before. So he comes in. He's done a phenomenal job with Jonathan Taylor coming back. He's done a phenomenal job with Zach Moss. Okay. Then you talk about Tony Sperano Jr., who has arguably had the biggest impact of any coach Shane Steichen's hired. Ryan Kelly is playing better football than I have seen him play in recent years. And yes, I even mean 2021. If you look at his grades, you look at his overall metrics, a lot of the other linemen were covering for some, I guess, bugaboos, if you want to call them, for Ryan Kelly. He's looked better than I have seen him in years. That offensive line is playing ridiculously good football, and you've seen rotations with guys like Blake Freeland in there, guys like Wesley French, who in this last game handled Vita Vea like he was nothing, it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wesley French deserves a freaking gold star for that performance because Vita Vea is the Incredible Hulk with really good hair. Okay, so like I'm just saying Shane Steichen's coaching, even his quarterbacks coach Cam Turner. Okay, he comes in, all right, and he coached Cam Newton. He coached Kyler Murray. Well, you got yourself a mobile quarterback in Anthony Richardson. What a hell of a fit. And then you can't even forget about JBC, Jim Bob Cooter. He's been a phenomenal offensive coordinator given his specific responsibilities, even though Steichen's calling the plays. He still needs a solid-minded OC to bounce something back and say, hey, that's stupid. And Shane Steichen's professional enough that he probably trusts his committee. Okay, so like I love the coaching hires he's made. I think that the fact that he kept Gus Bradley is the only one where you're like, is that a smart decision? Well, guess what? If you trust Shane Steichen and you trust his play calling and his coaching hires, trust his decision to keep Gus Bradley because he really likes Gus Bradley and really trusts his defense.
I think what the thing is though with that is Shane was not wanting to do an entire overhaul, and especially with if you're more of an offensive guy yourself, you're not going to come in right away and be like, yeah, I'm going to replace the defensive coordinator that was here before me if I don't have someone I know and trust right off the bat, right? Because I'm feeling this team out. I'm trying to figure out what the best thing to do is. That'll be a video for another day on whether or not the Indianapolis Colts should keep Gus Bradley as the defensive coordinator. I made a couple talks about that already. And I have a feeling it will be something going forward. I'll just say this, Drake. I mean, Indy is the team that blitzes the absolute least of any team in the NFL. There is not a team in the NFL that blitzes the quarterback less than the Indianapolis Colts. I think we only blitz about 5 or 6% of the time, which is extremely low. But yet we're still a top 10 efficiency defensive line, which is, again, another reason why Gus Bradley isn't blitzing as much anymore right now, because if you have a front four that can do what it's doing, they'll continue to do that. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I definitely think that it's a great thing to see the list of coaches. I mean, first of all, congrats to Ballard for getting what we think is the right hire here. You know, we're talking about a bunch of other names, you know, from a bunch of different teams, and Shane Steichen so far has been one of the better ones and has brought in a great group of guys. I mean, Tony Sperano Jr., who's come in and been just absolutely awesome at revitalizing this offensive line. Like you said, DeAndre Smith revitalizing this running back room. and Jim Bob Cooter coming in, all these guys fixing the quarterback room. It's insane. JDW, what's up, man? How you doing? Also, shout out to the 60 people watching right now, guys. Be sure to like the stream, please. Like the stream. It'll help it get to more people out there. Please help us out. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so very much. I mean, tell me, Drake, if Indy makes the playoffs the way that the roster is right now, should Shane Steichen be a lock for Coach of the Year?
I remember actually writing a piece on I think I did 3 reasons why he should win Coach of the Year. Now, I think that honestly, if they make the playoffs, they probably will have had to beat Houston to do so. And I think that that's the other consideration here is D'Amico Ryans, because to take a rookie quarterback, regardless of if Stroud's a superstar or not, all right, regardless of if he's the first guy to finally, and I'm an IU guy, and I'm just so sick of hearing about OSU quarterbacks can't make it in the NFL. And it's kind of refreshing in a very weird way to see, CJ out there really balling out. So good on him. But D'Amico Ryans and what he's done with also Tank Dell, he's made Dalton Schultz almost transition seamlessly from Dallas to Houston. And they've had, shake up at running backs, and they just keep on being competitive. They almost beat Jacksonville. So I think that's the other consideration. Maybe even Doug Peterson. AFC South, seriously, like you've seen some real resurgent coaches here in this division. But, man, if they make the playoffs, we're not talking about Houston having a backup. We're not talking about Houston. I mean, arguably Houston's receiver corps is more threatening. I mean, you have a legitimate tight end one who's proven with Dalton Schultz. Tank Dell is basically Josh Downs, only not. I don't think he has as many catches. And Nico Collins is basically Michael Pittman. I mean, it's almost a mirror. It's kind of eerie. But yeah, I think that he's definitely one of the front runners for sure. If he finishes 10-7, they end up in the playoffs somehow. I mean, they were 4-12-1 with 2 freaking coaches, one of which was a man that had high school football experience. Okay. And now they're here without Anthony Richardson and with a slew of injuries and a shakeup at O-line almost every week. I think that you have to absolutely consider him at least.
I think Paul Wilson hits it on the head here. I think it's either Shane or Ryans for Coach of the Year at this point. It's whichever one of them gets the dog out. I mean, Dan Campbell's name gets brought up there. No question
that's another
about
one.
that. I mean,
that's another one.
What you're seeing with the Lions, I mean, they're having their best season that they've had in 60 years, right? No question about that. But at the same time, the Lions have a lot more to lose by, if they end up losing a lot of these games at the end of their schedule, which they haven't looked great over the last couple weeks. And if they get bounced early, I don't think that Dan Campbell's going to win it. And I think because you just look at the story of these 2 coaches, right? 2 rookie coaches that took over 2 of the 4 worst teams in the entire NFL going into this year, and then had both of them in the run for the playoffs the next year, even with like worse circumstances. That is definitely something that should definitely be considered. Again, shout out to everybody watching. Please subscribe. Be sure to like the stream, guys. It helps get out to more people. Greatly appreciate it. Also, by the way, guys, would love it if you guys would sub to the AFC South Roundtable podcast on YouTube. Bring the Juice, 713 Houston Sports, UCF Jaguar, and Titan Upload Network are all part of this channel. You guys can subscribe by clicking the link in the pinned comment in the comment section below. Please go and do that. We drop new live streams every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Would greatly appreciate all of you tuning in to that. But we kind of talked a little bit, Drake, about just what we've seen and everything else so far. But at the end of the day, UCF Jaguar should stay off Twitter. Why? He just had a video that literally just hit over 1 million views on it on Twitter. Why would he want to stay off of it? It's because he riles up Texans fans. That's why. And that's fine. That's what this is all about. but let's go into this matchup here, Drake. I think the glaringly obvious point, and we can address it here now. I think everyone is mentioning it at this point. You're facing a Tennessee team that offensively, from their O line, has given up the 5th most sacks of any team in the NFL this year. And if you look at Indy, they're tied for 5th for the most sacks in the NFL this year. So you got the 5th worst offensive line, and you got the 5th best defensive line at getting pressure on the quarterback. Seems like a really favorable matchup for Indianapolis's front 7, who, by the way, has had 15 sacks in the last 3 games.
Yeah, as far as pass rush, I actually mentioned this to a couple different people that they are better off if the Titans were in playoff contention. Okay, let's say that they had a more successful year instead of 4-7. Let's say they're 7-4, and Tannehill had stayed healthy. They'd be rolling with Tannehill. Tannehill is more dangerous to the Colts than Will Levis is. And the reason that he's out there is because obviously Tannehill was injured, but they also saw it as an opportunity to say, "Hey, look, we're not playing for playoff contention, and if they somehow get back into it somehow, I don't know if they're bounced already, but then so be it." But they're looking to just develop Will Levis and get him going now while they still have DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry. Okay, I think that Levis is a tough SOB. I think that Levis has an incredible arm. He's got great football instincts. He is a huge version of Brett Favre, basically. He's just a gamer, and he's not going to give up. And he is a dangerous guy in his own right sometimes. But the thing is, he's a rookie. He's got an incredibly limited receiving core. Even I think it's a Zigiem Okonkwo, who's kind of like that move tight end. He's not really panning out as a big threat. DeAndre Hopkins is pretty much the only guy, and he's having a down year like I haven't seen him have yet in his career. So I think that as far as pass rush, this is a golden opportunity for guys like Dio Dengbo, for guys like Tyquan Lewis, because I think that they're going to game plan for Kwity Paye. I think that they're going to game plan for a guy like Samson Ebukam, who's fresh off of 2 sacks, his best season, his best game of the year. So look for guys that are the complementary pieces right now. Ironically, Dio leads the team in sacks, but I think the one area, Derek, that I am worried about is the lack of Grover Stewart. I think that that's where you have to stop Derrick Henry because they're going to double team Defoe, and they're going to force guys like Isaiah Land and Eric Johnson and Taven Bryan, who's terrible at run defense, by the way. They're going to force guys like him to say, "Hey, here's a running back that's the same freaking size as you, tackling." That's what they're going to do. They're going to force Derrick Henry right down the Colts' throat. And if the Colts don't stop him, that's where I think Levis is going to have opportunities with play action. So number 1, maybe even 2 and 3, stop Derrick Henry. You have to absolutely limit him.
Yeah, and that was the one thing that we said a lot of in our preview was, it was one of those situations where before you had Grover Stewart, when you had Grover Stewart in the lineup, looking at it, Derek, since Cody got married, have the Colts lost a game? No, they haven't.
I saw that.
So, I mean, it was it's been awesome over here on the channel.
Thank you, Cody, for getting married.
Him know that a little bit. I've been letting him know about that a little bit. So, yeah, congrats, Cody. You made the right decision because the Colts are losing now. Anyways, but no, I mean, before Grover Stewart had to leave, I mean, you were giving up about 112 yards per game running the football, which in and of itself is not great. I mean, that's like middle of the pack to almost below average. And now that you don't have Grover Stewart, they've given up 147 yards per game rushing the football. So it's increased by over 30 yards per game. It's really, really bad. And I mean, even in the last game that we faced the Titans, I think Derrick Henry still wasn't that bad. I mean, when you looked at his overall numbers, I think he got decent yardage, but I don't think that his yards per run were actually that great, which ultimately is the thing. You just can't allow Derrick Henry to get 4, 5, 6 yards on you every time he runs the football, because if you do that, like you said, it gets a lot more disastrous for the defense, even if you don't believe in Will Levis's ability to throw the football very well or to go up against this defense. Nevertheless, I mean, it still is a situation where it makes things a lot easier. But Drake, I'm sure you've seen this video already. I'm going to show it anyway, just because. I mean, we're looking at this, and this was what Will Levis looked like on Wednesday with that ankle. And you look at him, and he definitely is laboring. He is definitely not moving at a good pace. And I mean, he's trying really hard to focus on his footing. And I mean, that's a bad thing, Drake. If you're a quarterback and you're having to focus on whether or not you have to move a certain way, especially when you got this defensive line that's already looking to kill you on Sunday, it's not a good situation. So, I mean, even if Will Levis is ready to go, I'm sure he's not going to be 100%. I mean, that's got to mean something, right, for this matchup coming up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's so I think it was John Hendricks mentioned something. Yeah, I mean the Titans are not good, okay? But the fact that the run D is pretty solid. Let's go back to last week, okay? They faced the worst running offense in football. Okay, Rashad White came into that game averaging 3.3 yards per carry. He had his season best against the Colts. He ran for 100 yards. He averaged about 6 yards a carry, and he gashed that defense. Now, I'm not saying Tennessee has the offensive line talent that, I mean, they don't have Tristan Wirfs. They don't even, I don't think Taylor Lewan is there anymore. I mean, they don't have really anybody. Okay. So I'm not saying that they're better, but I'm saying it's not Rashad White running at them. It's Derrick Henry, who can make up for a bad offensive line if you do not have the proper run defense in place. And they had Grover Stewart in that first game where he only had 43 rushing yards. They do not have him this time. The good thing is for the Colts is that they're starting Will Levis if he can go. He's not better than Tannehill. So I do think that the Colts run defense is not good, actually. I think that it's actually about subpar, even when Grover's in there. But they're like one of the worst in the NFL right now over the past stretch games where he hasn't been in there. And it's been the same story, even going back to when Phillip Rivers played and the Titans played the Colts. When DeForest Buckner wasn't in that game, they just ran it right in his gap and they just destroyed him. So I will say, though, that John is also right. That I almost said Houston.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been
Yeah.
extremely bad recently because Grover Stewart's out. But again, as we said, it wasn't great before he left, right? Like, I mean, it wasn't great then. It was manageable, but it wasn't great even then. And it's way bad now.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, this is the best running back that you're going to face for the remainder of your season.
That's fair.
So there's that. I mean, the Steelers, they got some runners, but Grover will be back for that. Joe Mixon, he's been okay. He's not been amazing this year. It's mainly just been an offensive line issue. Josh Jacobs hasn't had a year. Bijan Robinson's been more of a pass catch guy. He's done most of his damage in the pass game. And we know the Texans don't run the football well. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, if that's the big thing, if you as the Colts can manage Derrick Henry, if you can keep Derrick Henry from beating you up, then you will win this game. Seriously, it has come down to that. Very rarely do you ever see a game plan where it says, stop the running back, you win. It doesn't happen very often. It's usually the other way around. But for this one specifically, it's the truth, because I'd agree with you, Drake. I'd be very much afraid if this was a Ryan Tannehill-led team in Nashville playing against the Indianapolis Colts right now without Grover Stewart. I'd be very much afraid. But it's not a Ryan Tannehill-led offense. It's a Will Levis-ran offense. So my mind is skewed a little bit in that way.
No, you're absolutely right. And to go back to John's point, they are a team that if you straight up, even with Tannehill, man, I mean, we saw it. DeAndre Hopkins in the first game, 8 catches. Outside of that, I mean, Tannehill could find almost no one else. So if you stop Henry, you force Will Levis to play potentially with a little bit of a laboring issue in his leg and a bad offensive line and a running game that's not working and receivers that are not one of the top cores in the league. Honestly, even with Chris Moore's emergence, they're still one of the worst, if not the worst, on any given Sunday. If you can stop Derrick Henry, maybe even if you can't, I mean, Will Levis just does not have a lot of protection weapons. So I think that on paper, this is a big game that the Colts can win, but don't let it become a trap game, because I think someone else mentioned it in the chat that the Titans are 4-0, or no, I think they're 4-1. I think they lost to the Ravens at home, but they're still very solid this year.
I think they are 4-0 at home. I'm pretty positive.
I think they lost 24
let me take
to
a look
16.
at some stuff real quick, because I don't think they've lost a game at home. That's not true. Yeah, you're right. They did lose to the Ravens at home.
It's still solid though, 80%.
They've just been 4-0 in recently. Their last 4 home games, I think they've been in that sort of. No, wait a minute. No, the Ravens and Titans, that was overseas. That was overseas.
Oh,
that was
that's
overseas.
Right.
They did not play
London.
in
You're
Nashville
right.
in that game.
Okay, that's
so
true.
They are 4-0. But
I'll
just say this. Most of those wins came very early in the season. That was when Tannehill was there, right? I mean, their best wins at home were that first game where Will Levis played against the Falcons, had his huge game, right? And in the last 4 games, Will Levis has thrown 2 touchdowns. I mean, I don't even think he threw. I'm gonna have to look at the touchdowns here for Will Levis, but I mean, Will Levis hasn't thrown a touchdown at home since that game. I mean, they literally he's not been playing well. So I get it. I mean, it's one thing to look at the numbers and say, yeah, they haven't lost at home. And, it's kind of one of those situations where we were saying like, oh, the Colts haven't really, beaten anybody great either. But don't forget that we just beat this Bucs team just less than a month ago. This same Bucs team destroyed the Tennessee Titans, right? So it's different. They got mollywopped against the Jaguars, and they played against the Panthers at home. Congratulations. We beat the Panthers by 14 points. I mean, at their place too. Okay, so it's one of those things where I'm not worried about the record thing. I mean, that's all the Tennessee Titans fans want to bank on right now is, oh, we haven't lost a home yet. Oh, congratulations. Indy, before this last game, won 1 game at home. Do you think that concerns me? We're on the road. We've had a better road record this year than we've had a home record.
That's true.
So that doesn't make me any less concerned. So if anything, that makes me more confident that we're going to actually win because we do better on the
road. I mean, hey, that's something else that I got to give a lot of praise to Shane Steichen for, is that he's played very well on the road. I do think that some of those losses, obviously the Browns one, that almost has to have an asterisk next to it. But there's been some certain games where Minshew has kind of mismanaged plays and had some bad turnovers and whatnot. And Richardson at the time was working through rookie woes. So I think that they're playing really well on the road. I think the Titans are playing really well at home, and something's got to give here. And I think that this is not to knock on Titans fans. I think Will Levis believes in his arm. He still has that rookie mentality that I can throw the ball through a steel wall if I have to. And the thing is, people in the NFL move way quicker than any competition he saw at the University of Kentucky. So I think this is a game where the Colts, who have shown they can take the ball away, by the way, that they might be able to come away with a couple interceptions if Will Levis throws those errant passes.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, again, this is a Colts team that in 16 straight games, Drake has forced a turnover. That's the longest streak in the NFL. I don't think that we're going to see anything different. We saw 2 interceptions in the last game that we faced the Titans against Ryan Tannehill. I'd like to think that the Indianapolis Colts will be able to get at least 1 turnover when it comes to this, especially with given everything that you've said with, this team should dominate in the trenches, right?
Oh,
Indianapolis should dominate in the trenches. So if you dominate in the trenches, you're going to cause a lot of mayhem on both sides. So I would like to think Indy will be able to dictate the turnover battle.
Yeah, and I think it's all the number one goal, maybe even more important than stopping Derrick Henry, because even if they start getting the ball going on the ground, you have to throw eventually. Okay. I think getting pressure on Will Levis is key because it's upfront pressure that's the worst for a QB. And when you're getting that kind of pressure and the QB is a stalwart and is stubborn and won't just get rid of the ball, like Will Levis, and wants to throw the ball, you're going to get a turnover or two. I mean, you just the Colts have been better at getting turnovers this season than some people think. I mean, Julian Blackmon and Kenny Moore alone have 6 picks. So, I mean, this is a team that if you throw bad passes, they're either going to get a hand on it or both hands on it, and they'll come away with a turnover. So look for the Colts. No offense to Will Levis. He's still working through rookie kinks on a bad offense, nonetheless. I think he's going to give the Colts, bold prediction, at least 2 turnovers.
Yeah, I've seen Derek here mentioning Will Levis also salty about not being drafted to the Colts.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I didn't gather that from those comments.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, I think Will Levis is kind of salty that he didn't get drafted in the first round at all.
Yes.
Remember, that was all the process, right? Who's going to get drafted before who, right? Like, and the majority of people had the consensus that Richardson was the 4th guy, right? The majority of people did. And, you know, Will Levis, after the top 3 teams not all picking quarterbacks and he wasn't, and just the fact that nobody else gave him a chance early in that, I think just had a little bit of salt in the wound. And then just at the end of the day, I mean, when you look at the Colts, I mean, they were obviously one of the destinations, one of the many teams that Will Levis talked to during that, and just so happened to, you know, end up being one of the teams that just passed on him. I don't think that is a thing of being salty that the Colts didn't pick him. I think he's just more salty over the fact that he didn't get drafted in the first round, because that was a big shock to everyone. Sticking with the offense here for a second here, Drake, we got to remember the last time that Indy played against the Tennessee Titans, there was one man that stood above all others. He said, my friend Jonathan Taylor is getting this massive contract, and he hasn't even stepped on the field yet. I'm going to remind you all of who I am. And boy, did he, in that game, touch the ball 25 times and garnered almost 200 yards of offense all by himself. And that was Zach Moss. Zach Moss had a career day, 25 touches for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. I mean, might have been, I mean, that's put up there with one of the greatest Indianapolis Colts running back performances of all time. I mean, that was an unbelievable performance. And I mean, at the end of the day, man, you got to tell me, how do you feel about Indy's chances of winning some of these next games without Jonathan Taylor and having to rely on Zach Moss again?
I think that Zach Moss has another chance to do really good things in this game, obviously. Now, the thing is, I can't remember his first name, but Tart for the Titans.
Mike Tart.
Yeah, he's essentially the Grover Stewart of the Tennessee Titans running defense, and he's back.
Yeah.
And that is a big addition that you did not see last time. Okay. And that huge run that this is just to be factual. That huge run that Zach Moss had against the Titans was when Anthony Richardson was in the game, and it was on an RPO, and the linebacker misstepped watching Richardson, and Moss got a step on him. I'm not saying that Moss couldn't have taken that to the house. He's got speed. But, I mean, Minshew is a different quarterback 4 quarters of a football game than it is 2. And you get 2 with Richardson, then you get Minshew. I'm saying that I think Zach Moss is going to be the X factor for the offense. I think that this is still a vulnerable Tennessee defense. They don't have Kevin Byard. They are still exploitable. This is also Tart's first game back. He hasn't been playing NFL football games. He's been hurt. So maybe they limit his snaps because they don't just want to throw him out there to the wolves that are guys like Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson, who, as we've seen, can still destroy people. I mean, Kelly's playing bonkers football this year. He's still playing like the best center in football at times. So I think that Zach Moss, I don't think he's going to put up 160 rushing yards in this one, but he's at least going to get 20 carries because you can't tell me Trey Sermon's going to be getting carries. It's going to be the Zach Moss show.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, to answer your point, yeah, I think that a lot of us would say that definitely was a big reason behind why Indy's rushing attack was so good back when Anthony Richardson was the quarterback, was because, like you said, you have to respect Anthony Richardson's ability to move with the football. You have to, or else you're going to get burnt.
Yep.
But I mean, there were games. I mean, we can't just ignore the fact that in that Baltimore game, yeah, Gardner Minshew, he ran for 120 yards in that game, and he pulled off some really good runs against Tennessee when Gardner was still in there, and a bunch of other games where, you know, I mean, he still ran the ball very well against Houston when Gardner had to go back in there, and a bunch of other times even after. We just saw last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
He had 7 yards to carry. Mm-hmm. I mean, he looked like he did not, there was nothing that could slow him down. So I think the difference is Shane Steichen has found a great way of running RPOs with Gardner Minshew that gives him the ability to keep defenses on their toes, because if you can freeze the backside defender for even a split second to allow your left tackle to move a guy over, that gives Zach Moss that extra edge to be able to make it work. And if the guy collapses and if the linebacker collapses, then that's a great find for Michael Pittman or Josh Downs in the slant. And it worked really well last week. So, and I think that's been the thing for Shane Steichen and Gardner Minshew most of the season, has just been these no huddle RPOs, real quick, get the ball out, make a decision real quick, and it forces the defense to have to commit one way or the other. And last week especially, Indy did an amazing job at executing it. Now, do you think that Indy will have that same kind of fortune against this defense, which, again, we said last week, that was a good run-stopping defense for Tampa Bay. Still ran all over them. It was no problem. I mean, you're facing a defensive line that has some really good guys in the middle. But do we really fear the Titans' defensive line more than the defensive line of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
No, and I don't think that you had the healthy Colts offensive line that you do now. I mean, literally, they're going to have Bernard Ryman, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, who, by the way, makes me look like a moron. I was preaching in the offseason that they needed to sign a free agent veteran right guard. Will Fries has put me to shame. He is playing fantastic football, resurgent football. And then you've got Braden Smith, who's still one of the best run blocking tackles in football. So I think that you, even with Tart's addition, Jeffrey Simmons, he's a real game wrecker. So is Harold Landry. You just have to favor that Colts offensive line. And I think that they're going to come ready to stop Moss. And I do think that Minshew is going to be able to take advantage of the secondary, because Kevin Byard was a dog against the Colts. I think it was my co-host Andrew Moore that always said that he would always come away with the turnover against Indianapolis. Well, he's in Philadelphia now. You can attack those safeties now. So we'll see what Shane Steichen has cooked up. I think that he is just a wizard at offense, and I think he's going to have some tricks up his sleeve to take advantage of that weak secondary. And even with Tart back, he's coming back from being off for a long time. So look for him to potentially have limited snaps.
Yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to see.
It'll be a good game, man.
What kind of game plan they have going on here for this game. I mean, hey, the last game, I mean, we saw Michael Pittman, have one of his best games of his career there. 10 catches for just over 100 yards. Unfortunate we couldn't get him to find the end zone in that game. Do we continue to see the situation where Michael Pittman keeps getting targeted like that? Because, I mean, he got almost half of the targets from Gardner Minshew And I mean, it was working. I mean, do you see them continuing to do that?
You know, I do because I think that let's see. Actually, there's something very interesting about that last game, real quick. So Minshew threw the ball 41 times. 26 of his passes, 13 each, went to Michael Pittman Jr. and one Joshua Downs. Okay. Went to those two guys. So well over half his passes went to the slot and to the left outside. So I think that you got to keep throwing the ball to Pittman. I also think that look at who he has. His second best receiver is a rookie. Okay. And they don't really have a lot of tight end pass catchers this year because Jelani Woods has been missing time. They don't have a voluminous tight end pass catcher. And Michael Pittman's just putting up ridiculous volume, and he caught 10 of those 13 targets. And the defense, you don't go against the Colts and not game plan for Michael Pittman Jr., man. You just don't. Okay. The fact that he still went out there, I don't care if they didn't have Jamel Dean and had 13 targets and caught 10 of those passes. I think Michael Pittman needs to be a Pro Bowler by the end of the season. I really do. I think he's deserved it. And I think that he needs to get league-wide recognition as a wide receiver one. I think that a lot of offenses would love to have themselves Michael Pittman Jr. So don't be surprised if he's like at 110 plus catches and well over 1,000 yards.
Yep. I mean, we've seen kind of what he's headed towards. No doubt that Michael Pittman is going to be a guy that you have to look to get re-signed over this offseason. No question about it.
Yep.
Try to go back into while we're on the topic of free agents, let's just kind of hop into that real quick. Let's just talk about the Colts free agents here. You got Grover Stewart, Kenny Moore, Taven Bryan, Gardner Minshew, Rigoberto Sanchez, Michael Pittman, Tyquan Lewis, Isaiah McKenzie, Tony Brown, Jake Martin, Julian Blackmon, Zach Moss, Jannard Avery, Danny Pinter, Trevor Denbo, Cameron McGrone, and Segun Alubi. What are these guys that you say they have to resign? Have to.
Okay. I was actually thinking about that. So I'll go bottom up in freaking rapid fire. I think they need to keep Segun Alubi. Okay. I think they need to keep Danny Pinter, Jannard Avery. Yes, he was hurt, but I'm telling you, he was having a great offseason as a depth piece. I personally think they should pay Zach Moss. I don't think his value is going to be as great as some people think. I think the market value is going to be way lower than you expect. Julian Blackmon, career best year. He's playing out of his mind. Re-sign him. Jake Martin's actually been a pretty good outside linebacker, but I think you let him go. Tony Brown needs to go. I know he's been a veteran, but he is not good outside of special teams. Tyquan Lewis, retain him. He's played good. Michael Pittman Jr., Rigoberto. Keep Gardner. Keep Kenny. Keep Grover.
It's funny because it's like you have like all these free agents. There's 17 players. And you just listed about 12 of them that they need to retain, which is quite crazy to think about because I just don't see that happening. I would love to keep most of these guys, but
some of that was hopeful wishing.
Here's what I think. Here's what I think is going to happen. And I'll tell you what I think is going to happen versus what I think will happen. Okay. And what I want to have happen. Now, what I want to have happen is to re-sign Grover Stewart, and I think we will. I think Chris Ballard sees there's a 40-yard per average run difference when Grover Stewart's not on the field versus when he is on the field. I think that is plenty indication of getting a guy to re-sign. And the good thing is with that is that because he's over the age of 30 now, you don't have to pay him $10 million a year to do it. I think he could get him for a few million less, maybe. Probably get him for around $8 million a year. I'd like to think so. Kenny Moore, I would like us to re-sign him, and I think we will because Kenny has just completely flipped 180 from what he was last year. He's the best corner on this team by a long shot. And he's the best slot corner in football by a long shot. You got to keep the guy that is best at what he does here. I don't care what it costs. You have to keep him here. You
Love the
have to.
enthusiasm about Kenny Moore.
Yes. And it's crazy because last season I was dogging that man so much.
We
I
all
think
were.
everybody was because
Yeah.
we all knew why it was bad. It's
We were
because
all
of the
like, he's going to go to the
contract.
Bears. He's going to go to Eberflus,
Yeah,
where he's
that's what we
good,
were
where he's
saying
good.
so
Yeah.
much. But I'm so glad. I'm so glad he's here, bro, because this corner room has needed him in the worst of ways. You're not keeping Taven Bryan. You can get that kind of depth anywhere else.
Exactly.
You probably will retain Gardner Minshew for around the same. I would like to think maybe a little bit more. Just
Real quick on that, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I have to address the Gardner Minshew, and there was a comment that was a pretty good one here. Okay, yeah, John Hendricks, who's had a couple stimulating arguments here, draft a backup QB. I don't think that's going to happen, and here's why. I think the Gardner Minshew knows this offense so damn well that I think that they are going to keep him around so that he can help Anthony Richardson with it. That's my theory. And I think that if he goes down, you want a guy who knows the offense. And Shane Steichen's offense is kind of complicated. I mean, it really is. It's not easy. So
now I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts in the fifth or sixth round would do that.
yeah,
Maybe they move on from
Ellinger's
Sam
kind of on
Ellinger,
the edge there.
and
Yeah,
maybe they
for
would
sure.
because there's a couple guys. This quarterback draft class is so deep that there's the 7th, 8th, or 9th best quarterback in this whole draft might potentially have the ability to play starting minutes in the NFL at one point in this league. So I definitely think that's something they could do. But like you said, when it comes to the mind, the experience, and just the mentorship that Gardner can
the
provide,
teammate too.
it's worth $5 million. It's not. It's nothing more than that. Sanchez, I feel like you have to keep him.
Good punter, yeah,
great punter,
yeah,
and 29.
absolutely.
You're only going to pay $3 million for him at most. It's not a big deal. Pittman, you have to resign. You can't afford to lose him right now with the production he gives you. Even if you decide that you want to go and find Drake, even if you went and got a top 10 wide receiver and you traded everything you had to go and get the elite of the elite, Michael Pittman's still been a top 15, top 16 wide receiver this year in all the numbers that he's putting up with a backup quarterback, mind you. So again, where's the drop off? It's just imagine when he actually gets a quarterback that knows how to throw him the football and actually gets into a system that actually fits him. I mean, he's been so good. So you got to keep Pittman, and I think they will too. I don't think Ballard's going to let him walk.
No.
I definitely think they're bringing back Tyquan Lewis because Ballard loves Lewis.
He's also stayed healthy this year and has played well.
I think he's the one guy, Drake, that when he drafted him and was heading downhill really, really, really fast, and Ballard and company said, this is your last chance or you're out. I think he's one of the only guys ever, Drake, that Ballard has drafted and went from going all the way downhill to going back up in his role. Like he actually fits the role of what you want him to be, which is a backup defensive end / defensive tackle, switchblade kind of defensive lineman that you can put anywhere in any kind of system and it works. And like you said, he's been healthier. He's been productive. Mm-hmm. He's had 2.5 sacks this year as a backup defensive end for this team. He's been a great bounce back story, which is why I think Ballard really likes Tyquan. You're not bringing back McKenzie. You can find another wide receiver for minimum at another spot. Like you said, Tony Brown's not making it. Sorry. Jake Martin's not making it. Julian Blackmon, you have to resign. He's having a legit all-pro year, Drake, at safety. He leads all safeties and tackles this year, albeit still has three interceptions on a year. So he's been incredible. You can't let go of a 25-year-old safety that is having one of the best safety seasons of anyone in the NFL. Zach Moss.
Oh,
Now,
that's the tough one.
while I would love for the Colts to keep Zach Moss, I don't think it will happen. I don't think it will. I think Zach Moss is going to try and take his talent somewhere else. Now, I would love to be wrong. I just don't see it where he stays because, again, he's going to be second fiddle to Jonathan Taylor. Even if they tell him, hey, you're going to get 50-50 on the snaps. Zach Moss showed you this year that when he's the number one running back, he's as good as any running back in the NFL, maybe outside of Christian McCaffrey. He's the second best running back in the NFL outside of Christian McCaffrey when he's the number one guy, if you give him a chance, which I think he can bank on and say, hey, give me $8 million because I just showed you like I can put up 120, 130 yards a game against anyone, right? So that's sort of situation. Jernard Avery, I'd love to bring him back. I don't think we will, but then again, it could be for very cheap because, like you said, he's been injured all year. Not a bad option. Danny Pinter would, I think you need to bring him back, and I would too. A really good depth piece at lineman. Trevor Denbo, he's definitely getting brought back because Ballard loves his special teams guys. And Alubi needs to be brought back for sure too. Again, young player, he's going to be nothing more than either a practice squad or a last ditch effort guy when it comes to playing, but he's shown he can play, and I definitely think that's what you need.
Yeah,
So,
and the thing about Segunda Luby is he played great against Carolina. He filled in for Shaq Leonard, I think, when he wasn't able to play. I will say there's two comments, and I'm just going to shout them out because they're pretty far up. But Paul Wilson, and then it's followed, I believe, by JDW Sports
ADW.
Talk Show. So Paul Wilson says it's a young team. They won't all cost as much as you think. We are fine. We aren't exactly a free agent destination. First off, all of what he just said is absolutely true. You're talking about AR is on a rookie deal. I mean, so many guys are on rookie deals. You know, JT just got his extension. Okay. Michael Pittman's going to get his extension, but there's a lot of guys on rookie deals still. And even next year, they're going to be on those deals. So the Colts right now can at least try to make an impact. And then the next one is JDW. I love Jacoby Myers. I think that if the Colts were to get a guy like Jacoby Myers, that would just unlock so much. I know that he's not a burner. I think that someone else mentioned Hollywood Brown. I think Jacoby Myers is more reliable, and I think that he's a better route runner. So
I know
I think the
somebody
Colts need.
mentioned Jacoby Myers in there.
Yeah,
That'd be
I would.
interesting.
I would not be the Raiders after this season, man. I don't know what they're going to do. They already dumped Darren Waller over to the Giants where he fell into obscurity and that mediocrity of a franchise. So it's just one of those things where the Colts are, I think they're going to at least have to address pass catcher. But look, you've got some real dogs and not just Marvin Harrison Jr. Okay. You've got some
Oh yeah, you've
serious
got.
talent in this upcoming draft.
And here's the thing, Drake. Before we keep going off on tangents here, I know a lot of people are high on Keon Coleman.
Mhm.
Honestly, dude, I'm not on the train anymore. I am anti Keon Coleman at this point. Maybe I'll change my mind in February or March when I see him work out some more. But until then, I'm anti Keon Coleman. Anti. And I know a lot of people are saying he's wide receiver too. I'm not with it anymore. I'm not. I do not want the Colts to get anywhere near Keon Coleman. I don't. So, and the reason why I say that is because of the top wide receivers in this draft, he's one of the worst at creating separation. And I think that is the biggest problem with this Colts offense from a wide receiver's perspective. You already have two big body wide receivers that can moss anyone. You don't need a third. You need someone that can take the top off of defense and be able to get separation. Now you have one in Josh Downs who can get as much separation as anyone else in the NFL, but you need another one of those. And I feel like you need more separation in this system rather than just another 6'4", 220-pound guy that has to moss everyone that he goes up against. And that's my issue with it. Now going towards this, I want to talk about the man whose jersey is behind you, Alec Pierce, here for a second. Listen, man, I've been looking at Gardner Minshew highlights, I think honestly, since the first time that Gardner took back over for Anthony Richardson. I think it was when we were in week 6, when we were facing the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? Ever since then, the amount of plays that I have seen where Alec Pierce is open and yet we miss him is tragically bad. I mean, tragically. I have someone on Twitter that literally sends me 3 or 4 clips every game that says, look at Pierce on this play. Doesn't get targeted here, but he is so wide open, especially all the way down the field too. And I think that is where we miss Anthony Richardson the most. Is Alec Pierce would have some insane numbers right now if Anthony Richardson was the quarterback versus Gardner, because I just don't think Gardner sees him.
Yeah, and the thing about Gardner Minshew is his arm talent is not what Richardson's is. Like, look, if Gardner's rolling to the right and he sees a guy off to the left, he does not. Most quarterbacks can't do this outside of Mahomes, Allen, maybe Hurts, some real freaks of nature. You don't throw across your body. AR can make that throw, and he can make it deep. Okay, we've seen him do it in training camp. But Alec Pierce has to get better at route running. Okay, just simple. He's got to get better at route running consistently. When he's open on a lot of those plays, he's a decoy for the defense. And Steichen isn't using him as a primary guy. There have been times where he's started to get better, but the thing that he's really good at that people don't talk about, incredible blocker. Absolutely fantastic blocker. Another guy that recently played for the Colts, wasn't a big receiving threat, but could block like hell, Zach Pascal. The only difference between these two, Pascal doesn't have the speed or the downfield threat that Pierce does. So I just think that they were really banking on Richardson being the guy with Pierce. And I just don't think that Minshew fits what Pierce's strengths are.
Well, I mean, and, you know, talking about the wide receiver blocking, I mean, this Colts wide receiver group and tight end group blocks better than any group in the entire NFL.
They're good.
Is no question. Because they draft guys that are willing to do that. And that's the thing. That's the difference. It's a mindset. It's not a gift. It's a mindset. You have to be willing to do that dirty work in order to get drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. So it will definitely be interesting to see how they turn, you know, going into the remainder of that. This offseason is going to be a lot of fun. No question about that. Again, shout out to the 70 people watching right now, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said, thank you so much. And make sure you guys click that pinned comment in the comments section below and go and subscribe to the AFC South Roundtable. Thank you guys so much. We're closing in on 2,000 subscribers on that channel right now. So greatly would appreciate if you guys would do that for us. Now, going back to this team and what we've got right now, man, what else do we have to talk about when it comes to this Tennessee matchup here? We could talk a little bit about last time, DeAndre Hopkins. He had himself a good game against Indianapolis, albeit it wasn't an amazing performance, but it was enough to keep the Colts on their heels. Who is going to be the guy that's going to end up covering DeAndre Hopkins in this game?
I think it's going to be between, because the thing is, Kenny Moore, he might be a slot guy, but if they need him, they can bump him outside. He's that good. He just excels in the slot. So you might see some Kenny Moore on him, but I think most of the time you're going to see Jalen Jones on him. I think Jalen Jones is going to be the guy, maybe some Darrell Baker Jr., but look, Jalen Jones, interesting. The Colts have Zaire Franklin playing fantastic. Will Fries playing fantastic. Rodney Thomas, he's kind of had a little bit of a down year, but overall he still has 2 picks, I think. And then you've got Jalen Jones playing fantastic football. He is not getting targeted. He's allowing almost no catches. All these guys are 7th rounders. They're all starting. All of them. One of them's a rookie. I mean, Jalen Jones is going to give DeAndre Hopkins hell as much as he can because he's physical. He meets receivers at the line of scrimmage, and he is really good at snuffing you out. And he removes you from a game plan. He did it at Texas A&M constantly. I think he allowed the least receiving yards in the entire NCAA. Okay, like that's ridiculous. He would just remove receivers from contests. So I think this is really where he proves if he is going to continue this great rookie start. I think you're going to see a lot of Jalen Jones on DeAndre Hopkins. So
Yeah, I feel like you have to put Jalen Jones on DeAndre Hopkins here because last time we had Juju Brents, and obviously that's not a thing anymore. But I think it's really been the Jalen Jones show, and it's been incredible. And we can kind of end it right here, Drake, with this. We heard from Baker Mayfield in the last game talk about how most of the sacks he took were due to coverage, which is funny to think about because, again, this is a corner room that has just been decimated. And yet we're still hearing that these cornerbacks that have been in the league for a while, have been on a couple different teams, saying that the reason they weren't able to throw the football the way they wanted to is because of the coverage. Pretty encouraging sign, I'd say, Drake, for, basically having, a guy that most of us wanted off this roster after week 2 and another guy that was a 7th round draft pick that we didn't even know would even make the roster before the season started. And that's what you're seeing now.
yeah, and I think the biggest piece of encouragement is they just played the best tandem at wide receiver they played all year. I know there's Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. Guess what? This is the first year these two have played together. All right. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin won a freaking Super Bowl together. All right. And the Colts went out there and got some coverage sacks on those two. Cade Otton's also a pretty good tight end. And Baker Mayfield, he might not be a bona fide starter, but he can still decimate defenses, especially zone defenses. And the fact that guys like Daryl Baker Jr., all right, and guys like Jalen Jones are out there covering these receivers, really encouraging, especially given the drop off that Tennessee's receivers are compared to what Tampa was offering.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this one here, guys. An
Marathon.
hour and 18-minute long stream. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. Just another, 36 hours until we get to see Indianapolis take on the Tennessee Titans. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. Hope you all will be there for the live play-by-play stream. And again, shout out to my guy, Drake. Always a fun time having this dude on the stream. Always love it. Thanks again, man. Greatly appreciate it.
Hey, man, anytime you can have me on the stream, I'm more than happy to join. And Colts fans, I said this before the Tampa game, don't hang it up because Shane Steichen is making absolute magic out of this team. And you might even see a little bit of Minshew magic. And who knows, maybe they'll get that 7th seed and sneak in the playoffs.
Absolutely. Colts in the playoff hunt. Let's get it, baby. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.